Hi, my name is Fabian Holle. In August 2020, I completed a Master in Sociology at the VU Amsterdam, and I'm very honored to have received the Master Thesis Prize of the Amsterdam Research Center for Gender and Sexuality. And in this short video, I will very briefly and very clearly try to explain what the Master Thesis was all about. State of reflection and creation, which is dominant, exclusionary, taken for granted assumptions. Okay. Hi, my name is Fabian Holle. In August 2020, I completed a Master in Sociology at the VU Amsterdam. And in my master thesis, I aim to answer the following question. How can art practicing LGBTQ+ forced migrants unsettle Dutch hegemonies, or hegemonies in the Netherlands? Many refugee studies focus on accumulating challenges that refugees might have. But other studies show that victimizing refugees reproduces ways of othering. In other words, victimizing or focusing on incapabilities of refugees reproduce and reinforce dominant perceptions, dominant societal perceptions of refugees as, for instance, dependent, in need, or even as threats. In this study, I aim to bring hidden exclusionary processes and ideas in Dutch society to the surface by recognizing LGBTQ+ forced migrants as agents in creating awareness of such societal blind spots. So rather than focusing on victimhoods, I focus on art practices and narratives of strength and resilience, whilst also still acknowledging their struggles, their personal struggles. In terms of research methods, I aimed for an intersectional feminist approach, in particular because of the attention this approach puts on power dynamics between participants and myself as a researcher. I aim to shift power a bit more, or like as much as possible, towards participants in the study, while also still keep on reflecting on my own power that I have within the research. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we decided on biographical interviews and an arts-based participatory component in which I asked 11 LGBTQ+ forced migrants to create remunerated artistic works in which they talk or express their feelings about experiences in COVID-19. So, but they had freedom to do whatever they wanted. So the artistic works consist of a DJ set, like a decolonizing DJ set, a visual podcast, written text, grinder poetry, video poetry, drag performance. And they're all, we all collaborated and we published them on the website of the Vici project, together with the stories of the participants themselves. So we worked together on this. And the Vici project is the project led by Professor Halle, and it's called Engaged Scholarship and Narratives of Change. And Halle, together with Maria Rast, were also my supervisors. My interest and position within the research is shaped primarily because of my own queer identity, my second-generation migration background, also growing up in different foster families, white working-class foster families, and also my background in professional theater and dance. Growing up as a queer person in different families, I felt very different a lot of times. And I also soon realized that the norms that the families or those different contexts were very context specific and felt strange instead of normal as their taken for grantedness suggests. In existing literature, I found that there are also many exclusionary ideas and practices in Dutch society that are taken for granted by many people. Mepchen and others, for example, in 2010 argue that the migrant other is perceived as almost incompatible with Dutch national culture. Also, Gloria Wekker, she describes how there is a dominant perception, an idea of that before the arrival of Muslims, Dutch women's and gay emancipation was almost complete. So to stress that this was an idea is not necessarily the truth, but this was the main idea. So Islam was then considered as a threat. These dominant ideas create paradoxes for the queer, trans, gender non-conforming participants of color in this study. For example, experiences of being feared and fetishized at the same time. For example, experiences of being too black or not black enough, or being too Muslim or too queer, or being too political, too activist, or too unemancipated, or being not neutral enough for an art institution, for example, or not other enough. These paradoxes, as well as queerness and also migration, can be considered as in-between spaces or in-between states, sort of states of liminality. Turner, in 1979, talks about these liminal spaces, like these spaces of limbo, spaces of in-betweenness, and that they can be challenging, but they can also trigger reflection and creativity, so creation. And indeed, I also found that participants in this study, within these sort of liminal spaces, reflect and also create, and therefore resist this dominant societal perception on different levels, on individual level, community level, and also on a societal level. On the individual level, participants reflect on their own identities and also recreate or reconstruct their own queer identities, and sometimes literally like challenging gender norms, for example, or sexual norms. On a community level, they share art practices in created spaces, and also negotiating queerness and also other things like their position in Dutch society, or just random mundane stuff. So they reflect and create and share within the community, which also then triggers reflection for the people that watch. And on a societal level, it's sometimes intentionally resisting and unsettling societal norms by activism. But this can be done in creative ways, also through art practices. So for example, songs, performances, or other creative outings and demonstrations, for example. So, being in between can be challenging, but at the same time, it's a space for agency, since it is a state of reflection and creation in which dominant, exclusionary, taken for granted assumptions are or can potentially be unsettled. Thank you very much.